then you could have cleared Wellington Street and said, the job is done. But you left. So that is just bugging me. I'm trying to understand. It just doesn't seem rational to me.
You didn't request tow trucks, you didn't stop this from settling, you didn't remove them from the start. Emergency Act was helpful, not necessarily needed, and you let someone else carry out your plan, then left. I'm really not understanding this. Real Fort and Grill's ex-chief Peter Slowly. Here's the clip.
Mr. Fortin?
Merci,
5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Slowly, good day. Mr. Slowly, I'm simply trying to understand the sequence here. From what I gather, you did not ask for the trucks to be towed. Can you hear the interpreter? Those trucks sort of settled in over time, end of January, early February, right here downtown Ottawa. Why were they not removed as soon as they stopped or tried to sort of settle there?
Thank you very much for the question. So the red zone areas where the along Wellington over into Rideau and down through the Parkway just west of us here were literally filled within minutes. Efforts were made to hold negotiations that were in place to allow for emergency lanes of traffic and to provide for a period of demonstration that would then end. Clearly did not transpire throughout the course of that day through the weekend. Those red zones were essentially filled within the morning hours of Saturday. There was no further movement into those red zones, but there was egress from them when we could negotiate that or when people chose to leave.
But why did you not remove those trucks from the start?
Thank you, sir. The speed around which the main convoys that settled in the red zone area was such that we were not able to move in with heavy tow trucks and sufficient personnel. The reactions and actions coordinated at a very high level by those early arriving elements of the convoys were such that the level of escalation that I referred to earlier increased the risk to public safety, which includes officer safety.
Yes, but here you have trucks parking on Wellington Street right in front of Parliament. I'm not a police officer. Perhaps I'm wrong and you can correct me. If so, I'm maybe naive, but I feel as though you could have called some tow trucks and asked them to clear Wellington Street straight away. From what I gathered, you had a hard time mobilizing these tow trucks that were hesitating or did not want to get involved. You may confirm that or not. If so, did you take procedures for that to happen, to force them to tow those trucks?
Yes, sir. The issue was not access to tow trucks in the first few hours. While we didn't have a fleet of them, we had access to, I think, between 3 to 5 heavy tow trucks that could have been staged and moved around the downtown core. The issue was not whether or not there was a bylaw offense taking place. The issue was public safety risks associated with trying to remove large trucks in large numbers with large numbers of demonstrators and residents, business owners, and other people in the downtown core. It was the public safety risk associated to that type of intervention enforcement action that did not allow us to start to come in and tag and tow trucks. That said, the vehicles that were in those red zones were continually identified, owners were identified, and it is my understanding, although I didn't see the charges laid after I left office, that charges were identified and laid against the operators and owners accordingly for bylaw offenses, provincial act offenses, and there are a large number of criminal code offenses that I believe are still either under investigation or before the courts.
But yes, I understand there are security issues, and you're right to mention this. They are major. But in your view, the idea of leaving these trucks in that perimeter, in that red zone on Wellington, is that in and of itself not a greater security issue? there couldn't have been a fire truck or an ambulance in case of another type of emergency, someone wounded or something like that. There were a whole host of other issues, and perhaps I'm mistaken here, but I feel as though that increased security problems, which wouldn't have existed had those trucks been cleared. Would you not agree?
There certainly was a very complicated security risk assessment being done literally on a daily basis. It was not until we were able to secure the ultimately 2,000 extra police officers that a level of scale on the policing side could match the scale and capabilities on the people, particularly in the red zone, but not exclusively. The issue, again, was the level of public safety risk, the resources and capabilities that we could bring to bear on removing that risk versus trying to do it in an under-resourced, under-prepared way, which could have, we ultimately believed, increased the likelihood of public safety risks, including serious bodily harm, loss of life.
Mr. Fortin, your time is up.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Swally, during the first round, I was asking you questions about the tow trucks. I gather that you were telling me that at the start, it wasn't urgent to have them towed, and then at some point there were just too many to tow. Is that correct?
No, sir. It was always urgent to try to make sure that we could maintain emergency lanes that were negotiated, but the volume and capabilities and the circumstances that we found very early in the morning on Saturday precluded that until we had the sufficient scale of resources that we were just talking about.
Est-ce que vous avez
Did you ask tow trucks to come and tow these trucks? At some point, did you call them and say, I need these trucks towed?
The operational plan included the securing of heavy tow trucks and other tow trucks to support our traffic operations. They were available. It was the ability to deploy that particular technique in the theater that quickly developed that did not allow us to do it, particularly in the red zone. We did tag and tow trucks, including large trucks, throughout the days and weeks that followed, just not in the embedded red zone areas.
Mais
But why? Why didn't you require, demand that these tow trucks remove the trucks from the red zone? You did say that there were children in this zone, that was a security concern. But you could have, I feel you could have called social services to get the kids. None of that was attempted, if I gather correctly. You were waiting for those 1,800 police officers?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, and so it's hard to follow the track of all these multiple events. As soon as we became aware of vulnerable children and other vulnerable persons within the red zone areas and across the theater, yes, we were in contact with and in coordination with on a daily basis with the appropriate agencies, including Children's Aid Services. We also provided them as much information around we could around the threats in those areas and sought their advice. But ultimately, it was too great a risk to go in and tow a truck with the hundreds of trucks, the thousands of protesters, and the capabilities we're seeing locally and across the country. And so we had to balance a scale of risks against a potential scale of rewards. And not until we could get the level of resources and the supports from the other parts of civil society were we able to do that safely and successfully.
vous avez
From what I gather, on February 9th, you asked for 1,800 police officers, correct? That was on February 9th?
Sir.
le 7 février?
The 7th, okay. And when did these police officers arrive in Ottawa? That 1,800 or 2,000 actually at the end of the day. When did that happen?
Again, just to be clear, from even before the arrival of the main convoys here in the city, we were receiving additional resources. Those resources ebbed and flowed depending on pressures across the country and the province. After February 7th request, we then met with our main partners, the OPP and the RCMP, increased the integration of those operations, particularly around planning and logistics. It was at that time, between the 9th and, say, the 11th and 12th, when that integration level kicked in, that we started to see a greater inflow of resources from across the province and the country.
OK.
It's up. Mr. Green?
Mr. Swally, sorry, I thought it was my mic. You said that the proclamation of the Emergency Measures Act was useful. That's what I understood. And my question is this: was it necessary?
Thank you. To understand the distinction, it was very, very helpful for the time that I was in office and that I could observe as chief of police.
Mais,
I can't speak to whether it was needed.
OK, est-ce que
Okay. After you left, Wellington Street was cleared. I know a lot of other things happened elsewhere. Let's focus on Ottawa because you were chief of police for Ottawa. I won't get into what happened in Alberta and elsewhere in Ontario, but here in Ottawa, under your jurisdiction, there was the issue of Wellington Street that was blocked. You asked for 1,800 police officers on February 7th. From what I gather, they arrived on around the 12th of February.
Started to arrive over the course of the time that I was in office. The vast majority of them arrived after I left office.
OK, mais il y en est arrivé.
Okay, so some arrived. You said you couldn't have the trucks towed because you were concerned about security issues. You also did not remove the children or vulnerable people. I'm not quite clear on why that was. Again, I would imagine security issues. And then you leave. And then the street is cleared. When they cleared Wellington Street, the police officers, was that in keeping with the plan that you had drawn up when you were there, or was it an entirely different thing?
It was a plan that we had been developing from before the arrival of the convoy events in the city all the way through till my last day in office. There was
Okay.
only ever one plan.
OK, donc,
Okay, so that plan that you had drawn up from the start, that's the plan that was enforced to clear Wellington Street. It worked. I think we can say that. It took 2 or 3 days, and then, yeah, everyone was out. In what way did the Emergency Measures Act, in what way would it have been useful for the execution of this plan of yours?
Again, I can only speak to the days I was in office, probably less than 48 hours while the Federal Emergency Act was in place. But I've, again, referenced previously, I think it was Mr. Harder's questions, the additional capabilities to swear officers in from out of province to be more quickly deployed into the theater, the ability to access more and more consistently, predictably, resources like tow trucks.
ils
That's two
étaient là,
examples.
on comprend qu'ils sont.
They were there. We understood they arrived. You said they started arriving prior to your resigning, and then it continued. I'm not sure exactly until what date, but your plan was working. It was underway, and it was working. The additional police officers were there, and that's actually how the street was cleared. I'm having a hard time understanding in what way the Emergency Measures Act was useful. I'm trying to understand. I'm having a hard time understanding why you left. I mean, in keeping with what Senator Carignan was saying, it seemed as though everything you wanted actually happened. And then you could have cleared Wellington Street and said, the job is done. But you left. So that is just bugging me. I'm trying to understand. It just doesn't seem rational to me. You are a rational man, and that is obvious. But perhaps I'm just not grasping all of the details here, and I would like to have a better understanding of what happened. Why would a man like you, with your level of experience, your skills, and this is a difficult situation to manage, but that's an exciting challenge for a man of your stature. And then the plan is happening, it's in place, it's being carried out, and for a reason no one understands, you leave, and somebody else, other than you, manages to bring that to fruition and clear the street. What happened?
I'm trying to parse the question out of that, sir, but
C'est passé, la question.
What happened is the question. Why did you leave? Why did you let someone else carry out your plan?
again, I'll try to restate what I stated earlier. I appreciate your need for clarity. I'll do my best. There are a wide range of reasons why I considered a resignation. And there were a wide range of factors putting pressure on that. But the singular one that I was focused on was public safety, which includes the safety of my members. I've said it before, and I'll say it again to you, sir. Anything that I could do for any second that I held that office to improve the likelihood of safe outcomes for the citizens of the city, including my service members, I was going to do. And that was literally the last thing I could do to push the resources in to fully implement the plan that was ultimately successsul.
C'est tout.
Sorry.
Merci. Merci.